Okay. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I have attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you very much. On Monday, if you didn't know already, actually, we already talked about this yesterday because I'm thinking, it's Green Day. I have to redo everything that I did on Blue Day, but that only counts with the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. We're fresh, new day, right? Yeah. Fresh, right? The reason I handed some of those back is because I didn't see Julian yesterday, right? I didn't see Livy yesterday. I didn't see Lennon yesterday, right? Who got the most among the seniors? Who was the most correct in their election predictions for president? Was it Jack's son or was it Jack?
I was close.
You were close. You did well. Jack got one wrong, but a junior got them all right. And she didn't actually remember because when I told her, she's like, oh, wow. Some people are like watching it and so forth, and scorekeeping and so forth. But yeah, it's done. The election's over. We move on. Okay? Really, the only thing left to take place is Congress will get the official word from the Electoral College. But we already know the official word. It's like you guys rummaging around your house. Do you do this? Looking for where your parents have stashed the gifts for you?
I used to do that.
You used to do that? And of course, the thing is, if you're smart about it, you just go look and then you're like, go away. And then on, when the presents are actually delivered, you act like, surprise, So here's Congress, first week of January. Oh my gosh, surprise! Biden and Harris won the Electoral College. No, we know that, okay? The only question I have still in my mind, as far as like the transition is whether Trump will be there. Okay, Landon, what do you think? Will Trump attend the inauguration of Biden? How many guys? Actually, how many? No, I'm curious. Prediction. How many of you predict that Trump will be at the inauguration of Biden? How many of you guys predict he will not be? And the early thing is maybe a rally in Florida or something like that. And that would be, I think that would be a first for a normal inauguration. Shh. I mean, the only other times, like when somebody is inaugurated the very first time or takes the oath of office, I mean, Lyndon B. Johnson took the oath of office for the first time on an airplane coming back from Dallas, Texas, with Jackie Kennedy standing right by him, covered with blood from her husband who'd been shot earlier that day. Normally, when we have a normal transition, like when Barack Obama left the White House and Donald Trump came into the White House, Obama was there, okay? Sometimes it's a little uncomfortable. George H.W. Bush, he got beat by Bill Clinton in an election. Would George H.W. Bush show up for the inauguration of the guy that beat him? Yeah, I mean, because that's just, it's America, right? We get in there and we tangle and so it's like sports. You guys don't have any ill feeling against the teams that you, oh, you do? Okay, never mind. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like, fight, compete, and then when it's all over, you're like, here, you offer him a hand. And
Volleyball, the wrestling real fast.
It depends on the team. You got some bad blood with some folks? Oh, they're rude. Oh, and you're not rude to them. No, of course not. That would be just, some people are people. Yeah, whereas you're not people. You're like saints. Yeah, we should change our name from the Huskies to like the Saints or something like that. Okay, we're cool on Huskies. All right, so here we go. Shh. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to getting your papers turned in to me on Friday. If you do have any questions as far as citation, things like that, I mean, I've been getting more of those kinds of things. Some of them I can answer easily. Some of them, if it's like really particular, I'm like, oh, pull out your Mrs. Rao card because she's very good and she can often give you like a real quick answer as far as like really difficult type citation things. But most of the things you can look up yourself, or I don't mind. Okay, Livy still has some ideas and questions and so forth. I'm not going to ask right now because you just shoved a bunch of food in your mouth. But if you do have any other questions and so forth, you think I can answer, send me an email. Okay, because I will respond not right away. Sometimes it takes me a little while to get email responses and things back, especially if it's not my class, if it's TOK. But I do ultimately come up with the stuff that you need. Okay, all right. Looking at this, I actually just posted on Google Classroom. You guys are going to be watching it in here if you are physically here. We may get started on it today, although I don't know if we will. If not, next time, we're going to see the first 20 minutes of the CNN Cold War video on, it's called episode number 18, it's Backyard. And it looks at the Cold War with the United States related to Latin America, which is what we're looking at right now. Okay? We're looking at Latin America, and we're throwing Canada in there as well. I bet if you're going to be at home, I'll basically be turning this video off. Okay? So just make sure you watch it at home. I've got the link. Again, it's the first 20 minutes. The last part of that episode deals more with like Nicaragua, and that's going to be part of our next unit. Shh. And I'm already getting ready to get started on the next unit. The only question is when. Will I do it before the test on this unit, or will I do it like right after? I don't know. We're having the test actually fairly soon as far as the sequence of dates. I see you Thursday. I see you Friday. I don't see you the Monday after the break. You'll be basically studying for my test. When you come in here on the 5th, and I think we're still doing, seniors are supposed to be here every day. So if you want to actually be here for the review, be here on Tuesday, January the 5th. And then Julian, when am I going to give you the test?
You're going to give us the test when we come back. And it'll be on the 7th, the 8th.
Wednesday, the 6th of January. So for those of you guys who are pulling this, like some days I show up on, this is the first time I've actually seen you guys like in the same classroom at the same time. Yeah. I was just thinking it was like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, you know, no, but you are actually two separate people. This is cool. It's awesome. It's amazing. I like that. Yeah, because I get confused sometimes. It doesn't take much. But yeah, you'll both be here on the day of the test. Y'all want to be here on the day of the test, because if you're not here on the day of the test, what, am I going to have you like do some alternative thing? No. You're going to come in at lunch or after school and you're going to take that test.
Yeah.
Don't take that test.
Take that test. Take it like a champ.
Yeah.
Body the test. Absolutely.
I haven't gotten the essays that they're doing, but they will be essays. Because this is a 75-point test. That's not just one essay. It's two. Yeah, yeah, that's 2 essays. And some of you guys are like, I'd rather do that. Then memorize like all the different names of all the Chinese, you know. Lin Biao, Li Shaoxi, Chang Xing, Zhou Enlai, right? Deng Xiaoping. Cats. White cats, black cats. Any cats are around. All right, any questions? All right, let's get to it. Okay. All right, and this actually is going to come up in the context of the video, Cold War backyard, because we're going to get into more detail of Chile. But Ashton, what did you learn last time? Did the United States like the popularly elected Chilean president, Salvador Allende? Why not? That's correct. Really, that guy's name communist. When you're writing essays and so forth, we're going to need a little bit more specificity. That guy, that Spanish-speaking guy thing. Castro. Yeah, Fidel Castro. There you go. Okay. And you got your notes out? You're taking notes. Oh, you just handed them off. Yeah, Fidel. This is going to be interesting. In fact, write this down as we go through this. Write this down. You guys know what a litmus test is? That's like a chemical thing. Raise your hand if you can tell me what a litmus test is. Raise your hand if you can tell me what a litmus test. What is a litmus test? You can give me the basic like chemical definition first, and then we'll apply it into like a context of like politics and so forth. Go for it.
Okay, so it's basically when you get like a certain paper and a solution, and it'll give you a range of like colors based off of what the chemical makeup of it is.
Okay. So we're doing class here. Thank you. So, like, you've got this thing, and then you take a piece of paper and you put it in there, and then you look at the piece of paper and you go, oh, I've conducted a litmus test. I now have a conclusion as to whether or not, I don't know, positive, negative, or what scale and so forth, right? Usually they do those to, like, test, like, for what? The pH, yeah, whether it's, like, positive or negative. Am I talking about the base or? There we go. Good. Right? And like maybe, and apparently like the FDA just approved like some over-the-counter like COVID test, so you can just sort of like oh. And it's mostly like accurate as far as positive and negative readings and so forth. So here we go. Write this down. You ready? A litmus test for the United States during the Cold War on whether or not we like a Latin American government. I don't know. What would be a litmus test? Raise your hand if you can tell me. What would be a litmus test on whether or not, and think of Chile, for example, whether or not we like that Latin American government during the Cold War? What would be a test? If they do this, we like them. If they do that, we don't like them. Yes? That's pretty much what it boils down to. If they are too friendly with the Soviet Union, or who's our boogeyman in Latin America that makes us nervous because they actually allowed for Soviet nuclear missiles to be located very closely to us. Put this down. This is actually a pretty good predictor of our attitude toward that country. If they're too close to Fidel Castro, and our presidents, and this is pretty consistent for most of our presidents during the Cold War, if they see images like this, it's going to put up a red flag, literally a red flag. And we're not talking about Republican red, we're talking about, or Santa red, we're talking about communist red. If they see this, they're concerned. Because this is what we know about Castro. Okay? We've seen this in the videos. He's never shy about his strong anti-U.S. positions. Got it? In fact, sometimes what you'll hear from him is, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and like the Soviets are always being sort of like really calm and cool and so forth. And I'm like, I think there's actually a little bit more coordination there than they let on, but let's not deny. Let's not deny, Castro really hates the United States of America. I mean, the United States of America, what? Livy, did the United States of America ever support an effort to overthrow Castro? Did it work? No. Do you remember the name of that? It's a bay of something. It's not chickens. It's a bay of pigs, yeah. So we did a lame support of Cuban exiles to try and overthrow the Castro government. So this is a fascinating thing. And here's the irony. Make sure you put this down. Sometimes when we don't support some country because they're too friendly with Castro, and oftentimes that is also, they're too sort of left of center, they're more favorable toward like land reform and socialistic kind of political ideas. Even if that person is elected by the people, we're for democracy, right? I thought we're for democracy. So are we for like, yay, the results of every democratically held election? No. Not always. Here's the deal. During the Cold War, oftentimes, if the people of a country like Chile, for example, elect somebody who leans too far to the left, we get real nervous. And would we even go so far as to support an overthrow of that popularly elected person? The answer is yes. And I think you see that quite clearly. The best example is going to be Chile. Okay, we'll see that pop up in some of the other ones, which creates a real disconnect because which leader in the fight in the Cold War is more for democracy and let the people decide? The Soviet Union or the United States? Yeah. And so it kind of tarnishes our position if we do it too many times, or even if we do it at all, if we support an overthrow of a popularly elected government. I mean, it's like in this country. How many of you guys have ever in your lifetime not been happy with the outcome of an election? How many of you guys support a military violent overthrow of the result of that election? Really? Really? That's treason. I mean, hello. Jackson, let me tell you about something. We had a presidential election. When's the next presidential election?
4 years.
Exactly. Can you wait that long? Yeah. Does the president have absolute power? No. Right? If you're not happy with, say, the election of Biden, do the Republicans have strength in Congress to counter perhaps some of Biden's proposals? Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Georgia, actually, we'll get that figured out here in a few weeks because Georgia's having Senate elections, and if the Republicans win one of the two, then they've got a majority in the Senate. Okay, and the Democrat majority in the House has actually gotten a lot smaller. This is democracy, right? I mean, in the early Cold War, do you remember in Italy when they were having an election? Did the United States send in military to help?
No, they asked
They asked Italian families to write letters to their family back in Italy. And we also gave money to the anti-communist political parties, and that worked in Italy. But put this down. In Latin America, we're going to see sometimes we're going to intervene. Because what matters most in the Cold War? Oftentimes, in the view of the American government, yeah, the overall big picture. That's why sometimes I refer to put your Cold War glasses on. And when you look at the world through your Cold War glasses, everything else filters out. The only thing that matters is, are you with us or are you against us?
What's that one movie where the guy has the glasses and he like sees aliens and crap?
That's weird. I don't know. Yes, go ahead, Julian.
Okay, so I understand they're like, ooh, communism, it's gonna spread, blah, blah, blah. But like, what other interests did we have in Chile that made us Nazis? I don't know.
That's a good question, and this is an interesting thing. You can write this down. After the Cold War is over, American interest in like the local domestic politics of different countries really goes down quite a bit. And you'll see this when we get to the next unit and we talk about Nicaragua. Oh my gosh, it's going to be a big deal in America. In fact, I'll show you a clip of like a movie that came out where the high school students, their teammate, well, they weren't the Huskies, they were the Wolverines. The movie was called Red Dawn. And it was just like this fantastic, like, worst case scenario where the Soviets and the Cubans and the Sandinistas in Nicaragua invade the United States of America. And the United States of America is not ready for it. And all of a sudden we have this guerrilla war going on in the heart of our country. And who is at the leading edge fighting against those communist high school students? Because they go into the hills with their guns and their pickups, and then they fight insurrectionary guerrilla warfare. This is America in the 1980s. We are concerned, okay, about what's going on in Latin America. So, Ashton, to your question, what really matters, what's going on in Chile and so forth? Well, oh, that was your question. Sorry, never mind. What really matters? Mostly, it's like, are you with us, you're against us? And what matters most of all, would we be as concerned if that country that's not with us is far away? Which countries would give us the most concern if they like went full-on communist support? Write it down. Canada and Mexico, because they border our countries. Cuba, it was a huge concern. I don't think it's as big a concern now, but it was a huge concern after Castro took over in the late 1950s and held power throughout the remainder of the Cold War. So let's look at this as we go through. We're going to go through Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. I'm going to give you some overall ideas with respect to during this particular time period. The Cold War matters. Okay? Are you with us? Are you against us? Canada, Mexico, Brazil. Generally, are any of those countries going to actually be like fully against us? No. In fact, one of them, Rodrigo, which one of those countries, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, is actually an ally of ours? No. No, he fell. Straight. Not Brazil, not Mexico. They were allies of ours during World War II. Canada. Yeah. Canada. Write that down. Canada is, they're part of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. They're part of NATO. I mean, they're in the North Atlantic. I mean, how many non-European countries are in NATO? Let me see. The United States and Canada. Okay, there you go. All the rest of them are European. Canada is a big deal. Canada is very, very, but they're loyal. They're on the same team. But, write this down. Canada is a separate country. They have separate elections. They've got separate public opinion, all kinds of various different things. Sometimes Canada looks at the United States and goes, wow, really, that's a head scratcher. You guys did that? And other times the Americans, the United States, looks up to Canada and goes, really? Why you did that? And so forth. It's a friendly relationship, but sometimes like with siblings and so forth, it's like, there's some tensions and so forth going on. And it depends on like who the people are. Well, the Cuban situation is going to be a little bit of a litmus test. Okay, so let's go through here. Okay, let me talk about first, in the early stages, we're going to be talking about 3 different prime ministers with respect to Canada. In the early stages, here we go. Prime Minister John Diefenbaker. Okay, he's going to be the initial one during this time period, so in the early 1960s. John Diefenbaker is supportive of the United States, although, here's one test. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, he didn't put his troops on alert right away. Okay? He basically was saying he wants United Nations intervention rather than having the United States necessarily go in there. And did we ultimately send troops in? No. I mean, we resolved the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cubans had the missiles taken out of Cuba. Where did we have our missiles taken away from? You guys remember? Turkey. Mm-hmm. And then we also promised to do, or not to do what? Oh, come on. Not to invade Cuba, exactly. Okay? So, eventually, they did put their troops on alert and so forth as they got a little bit closer, but they maintained relations with Cuba. Write that down. Canada would maintain relations with Cuba. In fact, one way of knowing what the relationship is with Cuba and Canada versus the United States of America, can you buy a Cuban cigar anywhere in the United States of America? No. It's still not legal for trade. That's part of the trade embargo. But Canada, I think throughout the time of Castro's government there, they maintained trade relations and so forth. You can buy Cuban cigars in Canada. What's that? In where? In Florida. Well, I mean, there's ways that they can come in. It's not like somebody's going to be like going around going, where'd that tobacco come from? I mean, it's like, yeah. So Canada maintains that relationship. Some of them are going to be even more friendly than others. All right. Here's the next one. Prime Minister Lester. Back up. One more thing I want to say, Diefenbaker. He's not real sure about having U.S. forward-based nuclear missiles on Canadian soil. Why would we want missiles on Canadian soil as opposed to the ones? Because it's closer. It's closer. If we really want them super close, how can we land in? How can we get U.S. nuclear missiles super close to the Soviet Union, if not from our own territory? Alaska is not a country. It's actually part of the United States of America. But that is one way of getting close. Okay? I'll give you a little bit of a clue. I'll give you a little bit of a hint. Not a country, because we do have Turkey. Yeah, and we did have them in there. And we actually are going to have forward-based nuclear missiles in Western Europe. So that's pretty close, too. What's another way of getting them even closer? Submarines. Exactly, submarines. And we have a lot of our nuclear missiles in the submarine force during that time period. So it's almost irrelevant whether Canada wants them or not and so forth. Yeah. I mean, if the Soviets send over missiles across Canada, will we be alerted? Remember, what is the organization? What is the, no, not NATO. What is the thing that puts us on alert? The Canadians have, detection centers and so forth there, and we're connected with that, and so we can see if something's coming in from the north. Remember NORAD? Check your notes. NORAD. If you check NORAD these days and so forth, it will tell you whether or not Santa is on the way. Hey, there's incoming! There's something red coming in from the north. Quick, assemble the troops. No, it's Santa. He's going to be dropping something. Yeah. Boom on you. All right, so they're a little bit unclear about that. The next prime minister actually is okay with having U.S. nuclear missiles on Canadian soil. So there we go. So we're like, yay, way to go, Lester. We like you. Okay? Although, something going on during the time in the 1960s, as we go into the 1960s, he comes in 1963, and he'll be there all the way until 1968. One thing, let's see if you can figure this out. All of you will figure this out, because I'm going to ask Rodrigo. What is one U.S. foreign policy, military policy thing going on in the late 1960s that Canada's like, United States, we're not really all that excited about how you're doing this? What specific foreign policy thing? I'll give you a clue. What war is the United States involved in that the Canadian Prime Minister is going, we don't really like how that's kind of playing out? Exactly, the Vietnam War. So we get some criticism from that. And so you'll hear that. Shh. The United States involved in the Vietnam War, unlike, say, part of the whole United Nations thing in Korean War, although granted most of those troops are U.S. troops, but there were others under the auspices of UN. There's no auspices of the United Nations in the Vietnam War. The Soviets never allowed that. I mean, if you put a proposal saying, we're going to have United Nations involvement in Vietnam, the Soviets would be like, veto that. Okay? But some of our allies will be critical of us at times, and Canada was one. Okay? Yeah. Here's another thing. Canada is also more critical, write this down, of right-wing dictators in Latin America. We're willing to overlook some of that because, hey, you're on our side. But Canada, and of course the Americans are looking and going, yeah, easy for you, Canada, to be all critical of the way things are doing. You're not the leader of the team, Well, no, whatever, yeah. But I mean, it's like, we're the leader of the team. Although, is the United States willing to just sort of hand over leadership of the Cold War effort on our side to other countries? It's actually a tough one because really, if you want to, and even still today, if the United States wants to maintain good relations with other countries as part of our team, what do you actually need to do? Have you ever been on a team where one person is like, blah, 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 I'm in charge? Doesn't that get pretty annoying at times? You're like, really, if you want to be on my team? Or they're always getting the ball and it's like they're never sharing it around and so forth. I don't know. There's no I in team. There is a me, that's true. There is a me. And cross country is a different sport and so forth. But yeah. So sometimes you will get, and here's the deal. Write this down. During the Cold War, the United States and our allies, there's more infighting going on because we're all democratically, most of us in the main alliance things are democratically elected countries. And we're all separate countries. What team doesn't necessarily have a lot of infighting among it? The Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact. Because who's in charge of that alliance? Soviet Union is, yeah, and they've got their troops there. So you'll get some little abrasions at times. Probably it's going to be a little bit tense during the time of Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau. Write this down. Pierre Trudeau is the Canadian Prime Minister from 1968 all the way to 1979. So he's in there for 11 years. He's in there for quite some time. Yep, this is still Canada. Pierre Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau. Do you see any early indications that maybe there could be some tension in the U.S.-Canadian alliance? Really? What is that? Is he being too friendly with Castro? Well, let me give you some details here. You ready? During Trudeau, the Canadians will remove the U.S. nuclear missiles from Canadian soil. All right, so if we want to have nuclear missiles close to the Soviet Union, we're going to have to launch them over Canada, or we're going to have to put them in submarines and move those puppies a little bit closer to the Soviet shores. You got that? Here's another thing that Trudeau will do. He's not going to get rid of all the Canadian troops as part of our NATO commitment to Europe, but he reduces the number. Okay? So he reduced the number. So maybe the United States is getting a little bit concerned, and they're like, I don't know, would you be concerned I don't know. I don't think this is going to happen. There's not much time in Trump's presidency, but there have been questions as to would he pull out U.S. troops from South Korea? Who would get nervous about that? South Korea, Japan, like everybody else in that part of the world. Would the United States pull out of NATO because European countries aren't necessarily, paying their full share of the thing? No, I mean, that's been a question that's been going on and so forth. He did certainly put a lot of pressure on NATO to start, spending more money. But a lot of people are like, you're not serious. The United States is going to pull out of NATO? That would be, ridiculous. Who would be in favor of that? Russia. Yeah, Russia would. Yeah, hello. Here's another thing. For the United States, and this is going to be mostly during the presidency of, Nixon. Nixon's not going to be, all excited about what Trudeau is going to. It seems like in Nixon's view, Canada's being too chummy with Cuba, too chummy with Castro. Okay? But let's just look at the basics. Does Canada leave NATO? No. Does Canada break off its military alliance with the United States of America? No, it's just sort of like, around the edges and so forth. We like it when Eastern European countries try to lean a little bit toward the United States of America, and the Soviets like it, and the Cubans like it when Canada leans a little bit more that way. Here's just a quick follow-up. Anybody know who the current prime minister is? It's not going to be on your test. Yeah, it is. Yeah. His mom is Margaret Trudeau, and Margaret Trudeau is an interesting one. If you were looking for like drama and like celebrity and so forth, she spent time obviously with her husband, but she also spent time in like New York and other kinds of things and hanging out with Rolling Stone stars and so forth. Anyway, interesting. And so the Trudeau name is big in Canada, and so for the same political party, eventually here you have it. Justin Trudeau is the prime minister. He's actually been in there for several years now. And Pierre was there from 68 till 1979. Okay? So there's Justin Trudeau. He's the prime minister of Canada, and everything's cool in Canada, right? I don't know. Watch out. Here's a warning for you. Do any photographs exist of you that would lead to some precarious questions being raised? What would be the kind of thing that you would not want to have show up on your potential job application? You dressed up in blackface? Oh no. This was during those influential times, not when he was a teenager, I want to say in the 20s and so forth, where he dressed up he likes to dress up. Okay? But it all came out in public and so forth, and he's like, I apologize and so forth. Because is it cool to dress up in blackface? No. When did that actually happen as a regular entertainment feature? During the vaudeville days of the early part of the 20th century and so forth. And eventually people are like, yeah, let's get away from that. I always felt bad for the exchange student from Europe because we were doing film festival things, and I think they did one on Nelson Mandela. She's from Sweden. She wanted to be very respectful for Nelson Mandela. She played the part of Nelson Mandela. She put blackface on. Didn't realize that in this country that's seen as being very kind of derogatory. She felt really bad afterwards. But, her portrayal in the film was very positive. She was reading speeches of Nelson Mandela and so forth. Very, very, very positive. Yes? They find them. They find them. I think there's a governor of Virginia and so forth. They were like, was that you? And so forth, Yeah, because people are own up to it, apologize for it, say that's not really me, and have everyone in the room deny it. It's there. It's kind of what view that you have right now could come back and not be okay 20 or 30, 40 years from now. I don't know. It's just one of those things. What kinds of things, was that considered when he came to that party, did people go, oh, that's shameful, you shouldn't do that? I don't think so. Okay. Nowadays, would people do that? No. If somebody shows up in blackface, they're like, nah, you're at the wrong party. Anyway. So, but isn't it fascinating because Justin Trudeau, when he goes to other countries like India and so forth, he and his wife and his kids like to dress up in the clothes of that country. Although apparently in India, they're like, you're taking it a little bit too far. It's almost like you're on kind of like a Disneyland tour or something like that. Anyway, this was several years ago, and it's kind of he's still the elected Prime Minister of Canada, and the people are fine, so, dress up however you want. But Justin does like to dress up, I think. Okay, so that's cool. All right, so Justin's the Prime Minister there. Tisk. There we go. Here we go, Mexico. Let's talk about Mexico. All right, Mexico during the Cold War, this stage of Mexico during the Cold War. All right? During this particular stage is when things are going to get really complicated. Is Mexico part of our military alliance? No. Is Mexico part of the Soviet military alliance? No. Is Mexico going to be having friendly relations with Cuba? Yes. Oh, okay. You can answer all the questions. This is good. You're doing very well so far. Okay. Does Mexico want to have a communist revolution take place in its own country? No. So this is an interesting sort of thing that Mexico's kind of doing during this stage. Mexico kind of supports some leftist activity, obviously Cuba, at least friendly relations with Cuba. And we'll see as we go on to the next part of the Cold War, we're going to see leftist rebellions breaking out in El Salvador and Nicaragua. And Mexico will be somewhat supportive of that, at least not opposing it on its face like some other countries in Central America, along with the United States. But here's the irony. Mexico has, at this time, pretty much one-party leadership. A very stable, perhaps too stable, some people would say, absolutely dominant. Raise your hand if you can tell me, what is the name or the initials of the political party in Mexico at that time that is like institutionalized revolutionary party? It's like a socialist party, but they don't create too much socialism. They already did the land reform, but they're not going to keep moving things forward. Some of this is like, I'm hearing echoes of the Mexican Revolution unit that we did. What is the political party? The party of the revolution that is institutionalized. PRI. The Parte de Revolución de I don't know, whatever, however you would say it in Spanish. Okay? So here's the deal. Let me see. If you're a young person in Mexico and you're looking up in America and they're like, wow, they got the Vietnam War protests going on over there, and you got all kinds of stuff going on over Europe. And I mean, you're reading about China, and Mao is encouraging young people to get involved and protest in Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, or 67 and 68. Will students get involved in Mexico in calling for its government to open things up? Come on, don't just be so, like, repressive. Yes. 1968, remember, and this was actually included in the film that we did on the Mexican Revolution because this was sort of like the update. In 1968, in Mexico City, at a region, a neighborhood called, I can't pronounce that, because that's like that's not Spanish. That's more like Tlachteclo. You did. Yeah, you can't put together the pronunciation. I mean, I've done this. Tlachteclo. Say it again. Very good. I like that. Very good. So the students were protesting, calling for reforms. They were doing it on their campus. They were bringing lots of people. There was going to be international attention. By the way, can you tell me, in October of 1968, what international event was taking place in Mexico City that was going to have lots and lots of people there, and maybe those people who were showing up and the news media was going to like pay attention to the student movement there? I'll give you a clue. It had to do with sports. Good guess. Not the World Cup. It's another major international sporting event. Olympics, exactly. Write that down. The Summer Olympics. Yeah, there we go. The Summer Olympic Games are going to be held there. And the leader at the time, Gustavo Díaz Ordaz, is like, I don't want all these protests and stuff going on. It's going to make us look bad. I mean, come on. What do we need to do? I mean, the athletes and the media are going to be here like in a few days. What do we need to do? So they sent in the police. They sent in the military. They cleared the plaza. He was in power from 1964 to 1970 as the president, and he is quite repressive, as you can see right here. Up to 300 dead, 1,300 arrested, cracking down on October the 2nd, 1968, the student protest movement. About 300, up to 300 dead, and another 1,300 arrested. Okay? So, are they using like very like would this be, I mean, the protests actually were quite peaceful. What about the cessation of the protests? Not so much. Not so much. What's that? This one, right here. Yeah. Yeah. Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. And I don't know that I actually typed that one out in that part there. Sorry. Because this is, yeah, I didn't. Sorry. My bad. Okay, so to get it from the slide, we've got all these various different important people who you need to know for the slides. Okay? And then last, Brazil. We are going to finish out next time with Brazil. And this is easy. Just look at the pictures right here. And we'll get back to this. We'll do them all bit by bit by bit. But Quadros, is he suspect in the eyes of the Americans? Yes. What about this guy, Goulart? Is he suspect in the eyes of the Americans? Yes. Look who he's palling around with. Is this guy going to be suspect in the eyes of the Americans? No, he's a military dictator, but he's on our side. So we'll be cool with that. And there's Lyndon Johnson. Cool with this guy? Yeah. No. No, but there's people that are wondering. They still have challenges. I mean, we all do, but they still have challenges. But they're not a dictatorship. Okay?